Have you ever felt haunted by the feeling that your best never feels quite good enough? Maybe you hit your targets, check off your goals, and yet there is this gnawing feeling that you're somehow falling behind. Behind your peers, behind your potential, behind some invisible finish line that keeps moving suspiciously further away. Well, have no fear. You are just suffering an acute and chronic case of being a human. And on that, welcome back to the Growth Mindset Psychology podcast, or if this is your first time, welcome to the show. Here we like to discuss the science of self-improvement and philosophize about what it means to live a life well lived. I am Sam Webster Harris, and a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I started this podcast with a goal to decode what separates people who keep growing through whatever life throws at them with a quiet joy for every day, versus those people who throw in the towel at the slightest problems and complain about the snacks. Through conversations with all sorts of elite thinkers and reading hundreds of books and reflecting with my own ideas about this journey of life, I can say that sustainable success isn't about perfection in the slightest or magic bullets. No, it's about a system for getting better one day at a time with a humble attitude and not beating ourselves up in the process. Today, to help me talk about this, we are continuing our conversation with Frank Dick, OBE, the coaching legend who led British athletics for 15 years, as well as coaching tennis champion Boris Becker and the England rugby team. He has a great book called Winning that is a masterclass on personal success in a realistic manner and what it means to be the best version of yourself. And yeah, I can highly recommend his book. In it, he develops a simple framework that's transformed how Olympic champions, business leaders, and everyday achievers approach improvement. This framework is called the 4 R's: reason, reality, reflection, and response. And it might have some ideas you want to use in your own personal growth strategy. So, if winning isn't about reaching some specific summit or beating other people, and is a continuous journey of finding ways to improve yourself compared to your yesterday's self, well, it's probably worth hearing my conversation with Frank about how to do just that. So please stay tuned. So let's talk about winning. You've written the book on it after all, and spent a life coaching people in it. How do you define it and help people seek their own version of winning?
I'd like to think if we've got a passion to win in life, you'll find a way. And that's really the essence of everything out there. Whatever winning is, I mean, I'm not suggesting that winning is always getting a gold medal, because for most of us, that won't happen very often in life. But getting to the top of our own mountain, being better today than we were yesterday, overcoming adversity, these are all wins. These are all the kind of wins that we seek for everybody in life. So prepare yourself for that.
Cool. Thanks. What would you say to someone who's read your books and about winning and being like, oh, I read your book and then I didn't go out and win everything straight away? What would be like the best tips to keep that mentality of, okay, how do I just win every day for myself?
Well, I remember when my 2 daughters were growing up, every now and again they would hit a few problems and things. And I used to say, look, take a piece of paper here, split it down the middle, make A4 pad, and start at the top on the left-hand side and write down everything that went right today. And then when you've finished that, go to the right side and see the things that didn't. And I'll bet you now, even before you start, that the left side wins. And that's what winning is. I mean, you can't possibly expect everything to go perfectly in life. It's just not going to do that. And you set yourself realistic goals. And the interesting thing to me about setting goals, by the way, when it comes to coaching athletes, is that I've always ended up setting them a slightly lower goal than they would set themselves. And it's almost as if I say that's what you're going to go for, there's something at the back of their mind says, if he thinks that's what I'm worth, I'm going to go for even more. People who want to get on and achieve in life, to be who they can become, there's a drive in them that wants to grow to be better. But it's a foolish person who always compares their achievement with someone else's. The fact is, you start off in life when you're working with young athletes for the first time, what you try to define achievement for them when it's easy, of course, in track and field athletics, because you can measure it by a clock, by the stopwatch, and by the measuring tape. Can you be better today than you were when you competed last time round? because some point in life, you're going to be finished last in a competition. But did you give that your best performance today? Was that better than you've done before? Because that's all I can ask. I want you to be challenging you to go higher up your mountain. And the odd thing is, if you think about somebody who achieves a world record, right, all they've done themselves is to be better than they were yesterday. So it actually counts at every level in life. Can you be better tomorrow than you were today? Can you do something differently tomorrow than you did today? Because I believe that that's possible for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it's certainly, well, I wasn't around in the 80s and stuff, but it feels like it's harder today with things like social media, and you're constantly comparing yourself to others and all this sort of stupid stuff that doesn't help with your mindsets.
Yeah, I think that's hurting people on that. So that's one of the reasons why you'll know your statistic better than I do in all of this stuff, is that I think it's causing mental and emotional damage. And I think there must be some sense in life, personal achievement for yourself. It's got nothing to do with people outside there, because every single person, hopefully, who will watch this, and you and I and my family, we're all absolutely different. And so how can we all have exactly the same goals in life? How can we all expect to win the London Marathon? How can we all expect to get an Olympic Cup? That's stupid. You've got to set your goals relative to you and who you can become. Do you have a picture of that? Do you have a picture of who you want to be? Which is not, I'd like to be better than you are running a podcast.
Yeah, maybe you would be, to be fair.
No, I think people do set realistic goals, but very seldom in life do you really need somebody else to set the goal for you.
Yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, there's definitely a problem that's going on these days. And then back to an earlier point you said of recognizing your own wins and like the writing down what went right on one side and what went wrong on the other side. There's a really cool book where this guy talks about you just don't notice how much stuff goes right. As in, you always think that the traffic lights turn red on you and that there's a big queue for when you're trying to buy something, but you never notice the time when you just walk up to the front of the queue because there's no queue there. You just kind of like walk up and do it, and it takes like 2 seconds. You don't really go, oh, weird, I'm at the front of the queue today because there's no one else there. But if you did that every time, you'd be like, oh, wow, like 9 times out of 10, there was no queue. I just never actually realized.
Well, it's a really good point. It seems that there's something in our nature that will look for the flaw rather than for when things are absolutely all right. So, for example, you'll notice a button missing in your shirt, but you'll very seldom comment on the fact that your shirt has got all the buttons on there. And you'll notice that somebody's got a pimple or something, but you won't make any kind of comment when there's no pimple there. There's something in that nature that seems to want to find something that's not there or something's wrong. But should we not take some time to just, if you like, celebrate the good stuff that's out there? If you're like seduced into the errors of life, take time to look at the good bits and ask yourself, how can we make that better, rather than, oh, there's a bit of a problem across there, we'll have to deal with it. And when things are going right, can you make them better? Can you do things differently? I think in every situation in life, win, lose or draw out there, you have to be able to ask yourself afterwards, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? Learn from that and then do something with it. In fact, I can't remember if we discussed this the last time we were together, but I tried to work through 4 R's in myself and in trying to get other people to think about this when they go through anything, from a meeting to a podcast to a competition. And the 4 R's are, first of all, reason. Why am I doing this? What's the purpose of today? What's the outcome I'm looking for? Get the reason right. Next R is reality. What do I have to do? And how do I have to do it? Who's involved and so on, in order to reach the reason. The third R is reflection. First of all, in advance, be prepared to learn. That's in terms of attitude, but also get the machinery there so you can learn. But when it comes to reflection, what did I learn from this? And response, what am I going to do differently or better as a consequence of all this? So you reason, reality, reflection, and response. And oddly enough, I find that last point, the one that a lot of people miss out on. They don't make a commitment following the lesson to do something with it. And I think if you keep that simple little guide at the back of your mind when you go into any situation, when you come to the end, you'll always be moving on to better ground.
Nice. So you're saying how we notice like the little flaws that are wrong, but then we should have the mindset that we always want to improve. And like, as a coach, you're obviously trying to help people improve and you're always noticing the flaws that they have, but you have to sort of spin it in a way that, oh, you're doing really well. This is how you can do better, rather than like, oh, you did this wrong. This was terrible kind of thing.
No, you've got to be honest with people. You've got to be candid. There's got to be a candor there. If we don't have these honest conversations, these candid conversations, saying things the way they are, without being cruel, rude, disrespectful, whatever, get rid of that kind of behavior. But you're candid with people. If there's no candor, there's no honesty. If there's no honesty, there's no trust. If there's no candor in a team situation, there's no accountability. If there's no accountability, there's no respect. And the other thing to remember in what you are in coaching, Sam, is that you don't have to be sick to get better. Right? The number of times I see a coach who will focus in on a flaw straight away and try to make that right. Well, I've got a simple rule for this. When you're trying to improve people and make them strong, make them better, understand this. They are with you because of what they're strong at, right? You've selected them for your team because of what they're good at. So your first priority as a coach is to work on what they're good at to make it better, right? That's your first priority. The second priority is to work on a weakness only if it interferes with their strength. And the third order of priority is their weakness is causing a problem for other people's strengths in the team. So you work on the strength first. On the back of that, you work on a weakness if it's interfering with their strength. On the back of that, you work on the weakness if it's hurting other people in the team.
So what would you say, like, if I was able to have like a magic wand and bless myself with one key ability in my mind, what would you say was like the one thing I should be able to give myself to be able to sort of have more motivation on something or to ignore something? And if I could just have like mind control on one specific ability, what would that one ability be that's most important?
Well, it's a good point, because I think when you're, whether it's in business or whether it's out there in the arena, you know that there's a task that you're going to have to fulfill. You know what your task is. And you've done all the work for it. You've trained for it. You've done the tactical stuff on it. You're hopefully brilliant at your basics, because if you don't have the basics in place, again, everything else. You've got all of this stuff in place. And now there's the whole issue of commitment and intent. You're focused in on the task, and that's what you're going to have to achieve. Now, people think, well, that's all you need. Nope. You need something else to be going on in parallel with that. You must have a pretty sophisticated skill at how to ignore or how to manage the distractions. The distraction could be what an opponent does to you. The distraction can be the weather. The distraction can be how you felt this morning. The distraction can be what somebody said to you. If you let any of these distractions come into your thinking when you're trying to focus on this task, then you're going to be in trouble, because you dilute things straight away. It's kind of like when these distractions are around, if you can see them and are aware of them, you start thinking about them. If you start thinking about them, in many instances, that has an emotional consequence. And once the emotional consequence begins to be evident in you, inside you, and you're aware of it, then you're going to have problems, because you have to be able to control all of that, or you can't keep your mind on the task at hand. And so emotional control begins to be a critical thing out there. And there are different edges to this. I mean, if you're in a game, and in my mind, you can be particularly vulnerable in terms of that emotional control when you've just conceded a point or a goal or whatever, or whether you've just got one. Why? Because there could be an emotional consequence to each. When somebody delivers a coup de grace and you're you're suddenly back on your heels because you didn't expect them to be breaking through and getting that point. If you begin to focus and think about that all the time, and you begin to get to the point of some kind of a despair, then your energies are sapping, you're not concentrating on your job, and you can be smacked. For example, earlier this season, I remember Manchester United playing Tottenham Hotspur. Manchester United were holding Spurs. It was kind of an even game, and then Spurs scored. And 2 minutes in, scored. And so, to me, that's a clear example of you've allowed the situation to get into your emotions. As a consequence to that, you're not concentrating on the job at hand, smack. But it can happen the other way around. So if you think about the European Cup a few years ago, when England had scored against Iceland, Iceland scored 2 minutes later. And oddly enough, in the most recent World Cup, when Argentina scored against Iceland, Iceland came back and scored in a couple of minutes again. So you've got to be very careful about how you manage the emotions around that. You've got to be able to draw your brain into refocusing, reestablishing, get rid of all that stuff. It's a piece of history. There's nothing you can do about history. It's gone. The only thing you can deal with is now and how it will affect the future. And you've got to get your brain into that straight away. So this business of emotional management and control is really, really important, Sam. And if we're not careful, it can catch us out. If we want to take that outside the arena and into a longer scale, a longer term kind of situation, I remember listening to a conversation last year when a chap said to me, success can derail progress. I found that an odd thing to say because that's what I thought. I was brought up to think that success breeds success. But only in the short term, only if you can feed off that and use that as a new energy that, well, if that was good, how can we be even better? Can you keep that? Can you keep your foot on the accelerator? The other side of that, of course, is that you can get seduced by it. You can just get seduced by success. And if you're not careful, you think, well, if we just keep going this way, we'll rule the world. But the fact is, life is changing round about you all the time. And what brought you success yesterday will not necessarily bring you anything tomorrow.
Okay, thank you so much for Frank coming on the show. Really appreciated my conversation with him because, total legend. And I have a few reflections and take-homes to summarize for you now. Firstly, winning is not about achieving someone else's goal. It's about overcoming your hindrances and difficulties and being better today than you were yesterday. And in the conversation, Frank invited us to shift the focus of winning as a concept about beating others or achieving a gold medal, and instead think of it as climbing your own mountain, overcoming personal adversity and making daily progress towards who you can become. Number 2, if you're feeling down, take a piece of paper, split it down the middle, write down everything that went right today on the left, then write down the things that didn't go right on the right-hand side. And he will bet you that every time the left side will win. This is a great piece of advice that makes our own psychology obvious to us. We are wired to notice the flaws around us and the missing buttons, but Frank challenges us to celebrate what is going right, which helps shift the focus to a positive conversation with ourselves where instead we can ask how to make things better rather than worrying about what else could go wrong. And this leads straight into number 3. You don't have to be sick to get better. As a coach, Frank's priority system was very clear. He said, first, make people's strengths even stronger. Second, only fix weaknesses if they are interfering with those strengths. And lastly, the only other reason to look at their weaknesses is if they are hurting the team or the strengths of other players. And I think this is really important. He's so focused on stopping our human nature to obsess over flaws and instead build on what's already working and what we're naturally good at, making the most of our natural gifts and talents, putting the work into making them the best they can be. This has certainly been a powerful idea in my own life when you just go all in what you're good at and what you love and accept yourself with who you are, along with all your flaws. And it can really help you stop focusing on trying to fit the mold of being an average complete human and be your weird self in its full glory. Right, finally, I think I have to give a shout out, of course, to the 4 R's: reason, reality, reflection, and response. A classic growth mindset framework if I ever saw one. Firstly, reason. Why are you even doing the thing? What do you want to get out of it? Second, reality. Set goals relative to who you are and where you are at, and don't think about other people so much. Third, reflection. Assess your learnings and what to take forward. And finally, response. Most people miss the final R. It's not enough to just do the others without committing to the final act of your response to bother to do something differently afterwards. Otherwise, nothing actually changes. And with that, I hope you've had a few ideas from the episode for your own personal projects and ambitions or dreams, and maybe thought about how you could focus more on your strengths and spend less time being defeated by your weaknesses. One weakness of mine was certainly how much I hated meetings and email and how much time it sucked out of my life. And now I just barely do either of them, and I actually get stuff done instead, which is amazing and is my way of apologizing if I have ever been incredibly slow at emailing you. And it's also why I only take calls on Wednesdays, because I just have one day for it and it doesn't interfere with the rest of my life. Another weakness of mine is not enough people sharing and commenting on my podcast, and you can help me with it. Sorry, that was really lame. I could more accurately state that a weakness of mine is not feeling like a complete twat whenever I ask people to comment on my podcast. Moving on. Did you somehow miss the fact that I have a new show called How to Change the World? Have you been living under a rock? Or maybe just deliberately ignoring me? Or perhaps you think history, science, and philosophy suck and you don't care about how the world works or why humanity is the way it is. That's fine. But if you do have a curious side and you fancy some narrative storytelling, where for the first time ever, a podcast is following the entire history of inventions in chronological order as they happened, whilst also creating a series of lessons and mental models to help you, the listener, quite literally change the world, well, you can dive into my new podcast on any podcast player by searching How to Change the World and clicking subscribe. And with that, I hope you have a lovely day, improving yourself and those around you with positive energy that adds a little light to the world and a spring to your step. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
Studies show we need time for information to sink in, so I'm going to give you a 5-second pause. Silence. To reflect on one idea from the show before you jump back into your busy life. Ready and go.